Welcome to the Explainer. If you're operating in the senior housing and care space, you already know the everyday reality we're about to tackle. You've got software for clinical records, software for customer relationships, billing, and just a dozen other critical functions. In short, you have way too many systems. And if we're being completely honest with each other, they just don't agree. Picture this. It's that classic Monday morning ops meeting. Your sales director, your clinical lead, your finance director, they're all sitting around the same table looking at the exact same community. Yet somehow everybody's got a different spreadsheet and literally nobody's numbers match. It feels like a terrible group project where everyone did a totally different assignment, right? Well, today we're going to reconsider this whole idea of a one source of truth. We're going to look really closely at the language vendors use to sell it to you, because those mismatched spreadsheets, they're costing you time, revenue, and massive compliance headaches.
So it boils down to this. When two systems disagree, who actually decides which one is right? That is the hidden trap in enterprise data systems that almost no one is talking about. It's the question every software vendor kind of dances around, but it's absolutely the whole ballgame. Because when your systems start fighting over the numbers, someone or something has to step in and break the tie. Okay, let's look at our roadmap for today. We're going to cover, first, the shared intuition of broken systems. Second, deconstructing vendor buzzwords. Third, the missing piece, governance. Fourth, the operator-controlled solution. And finally, the ultimate exit test.
All right, Section 1, the shared intuition. We have too many systems and they don't agree.
This brings us to a baseline, everyday pain point for operators who are just trying to get a coherent picture of their communities. 3. That's often the number of completely different occupancy figures you might get for the exact same community on the exact same day. I mean, how does this happen? Well, let's break it down. Your CRM system says a bed is currently occupied because, hey, a resident just signed a lease and handed over a deposit. Makes sense. But over in your electronic health record system, that exact same bed is listed as empty because the resident was transferred to the hospital last night for a brief stay. Meanwhile, your billing system says the bed is occupied because the monthly check just cleared the bank. Now, the absolutely maddening part is that every single one of those systems is technically right based on its own internal logic. They each use a slightly different definition of what occupied means, and they're all running on a slightly different update clock. This happens constantly, and while it happens for highly defensible reasons, the end result? It's a deeply fragmented operating environment. You're left completely paralyzed, trying to figure out how to staff for the week or how to report to investors when literally nobody knows whose spreadsheet to actually trust.
Which leads us to Section 2, deconstructing buzzwords and the illusion of current solutions.
Look, the industry knows you have this problem, and vendors have created a whole dictionary of phrases to convince you they can fix it, but we really need to impartially break down what these phrases actually commit to. First up, vendors will often promise a single source of truth. Now, this comes from the business intelligence tradition of the early 2000s, but you gotta understand that this really just means consolidation. It tells you exactly where the data lives, but it tells you absolutely zero about whether that data is correct. Then, you might hear a vendor pitch a unified operational data layer. Sounds incredibly impressive, right? And it actually gets the architecture right. It sits above your existing systems, pulling information without forcing you to rip out your current software. But it remains entirely architecturally neutral about who actually runs the thing. Finally, you have integrated analytics, which essentially just means output and dashboards. It visualizes data, and that's pretty much it. So here's the crucial takeaway from all this. All three of these vendor descriptions are technically accurate, but they share a massive, glaring omission. Every single one of them is completely missing the concept of governance. None of these buzzy phrases actually state who is in charge when those three different systems inevitably clash over your occupancy rate.
And this brings us right to the trap of the analytics framing. When operators are frustrated, they'll often say, you know what, we just need better analytics. And they're expressing a very real pain there. But business intelligence simply answers the question, can you show me the number? It emphatically does not answer the question, which number is correct and how do you know? Putting a beautiful dashboard over disagreeing source systems, it's literally like putting a fresh coat of paint on a crumbling foundation. It might look fantastic on a big monitor in the boardroom, but that dashboard is just going to render your underlying operational contradictions faster and in way better color. It doesn't actually resolve a thing. The operational differentiation you need to run your business was never going to live in a pie chart.
Moving right along to Section 3, the missing piece, governance. The word they're all missing. So, storage doesn't resolve your data problems. Unification doesn't resolve them. Dashboards certainly don't resolve them. They all fail because they lack a clear chain of authority. To truly grasp this, we have to look at the massive difference between consolidation and reconciliation. Think of consolidation like a giant filing cabinet. It's just pulling everything into a warehouse. You can build a very expensive single source of truth that faithfully stores 3 contradictory numbers side by side, forever. But just shoving those conflicting papers in a drawer was never the same job as actually deciding between them. Reconciliation, on the other hand, is like a scale. It's the active discipline of weighing the data and deciding, on the record, which upstream system's definition of current or occupied gets to win, under what definition, and exactly why.
Let's look at Section 4, the operator-controlled solution, the true resolution.
Because once we realize that active reconciliation is a mandatory discipline, we need a framework that actually supports it. And guys, this isn't just about buying another software tool. It's a fundamental shift in philosophy regarding your data architecture. The actual term for this solution is an operator-controlled operating record, or OCOR. This is the enterprise layer where all your critical metrics, occupancy, care, labor, compliance, financial performance, capital, they all reconcile to the exact same operating truth. But the absolute most important word in that definition is right there at the beginning, controlled. It's controlled by the operator, acting as the ultimate judge, and it's sourced directly from the systems you already have in place. It doesn't just quietly store the competing numbers, it empowers you to decide, on the record, which one actually governs. To see why this is such a game changer, look at the 3 foundational claims of an operator-controlled operating record and how they stack up against the buzzwords we deconstructed a minute ago. Step 1. It provides one actual truth, not 5 different reports. This directly and fully answers the single source of truth promise by adding verification to the storage. Step 2. It sits entirely above the stack, aggregating and weighing data without forcing you to rip out your underlying software. This perfectly answers the unified operational data layer architecture. And step 3, it's operator-controlled, not vendor-controlled. This answers all 3 buzzwords at once, filling the massive governance gap they all conveniently ignored. Honestly, once you grasp this precise framework, standard unified data layers start to sound less like real solutions and more like they're dodging the governance question on purpose. Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, the ultimate exit test. A very practical takeaway for you. We really want to give you a tool to cut right through the reassuring marketing language on any vendor's homepage. If you take absolutely nothing else away from this explainer today, take this exact question to your very next vendor meeting. Ask them, if I replaced my EHR tomorrow, does the reconciled record, the history of which source won each disagreement and why, does that leave with the old vendor or does it stay with me? That one single question is usually enough to reveal exactly what kind of system you're really looking at and who truly holds the power.
Let's look at the typical outcomes of that test, because, well, it's a lot like a corporate divorce. If your single source of truth is built inside a business intelligence tool, it typically leaves the very moment you cancel that BI contract. If your unified data layer is built by your EHR vendor, all that historical decision-making typically leaves when you change your EHR. In a breakup, they get to take the house and all the records with them. By stark contrast, an operator-controlled operating record is architected from day one so that the governance history is completely portable. It stays with you. Why? Because it was never conceptually the vendor's property to keep in the first place. Operator-controlled is the ultimate, undeniable answer to the exit test.
You know, the industry vocabulary is finally starting to catch up to the intuition we all share. We know we have way too many systems, and we absolutely know they don't agree. But the solution isn't just dumping more data into a warehouse, and it certainly isn't just building a prettier chart. The solution is a governed answer to the question you are already asking yourself every single day. So I'm going to leave you with this. When your systems disagree, who decides? And maybe more importantly, can you prove it? Thanks so much for joining this explainer, and we'll see you next time.